USC is in big trouble. They don't have a defense. So can Caleb Williams and the Trojans actually beat Notre Dame? Let's talk about it.
What's up, everyone? This is the FanBuzz Weekly. I'm your host, Patrick, with my co-host, Will. We had an action-packed weekend of college football that we need to talk about many games. The first of which was the game of the weekend. USC survives another scare, this one to triple overtime. It seems like every weekend, the game falls on Caleb Williams, and he has to carry that defense. This one was the scariest of all. Will, do you think USC is in trouble the rest of the season, and especially this weekend against Notre Dame?
They are definitely in trouble. I don't think they're going to be able to get by this one. Notre Dame's defense is of a completely different caliber than anything they've faced so far. So Caleb's incredible. He is one of the best quarterback prospects I've ever seen, but he's one man and he can't get stops on defense. Notre Dame's offense has looked off in the last few weeks, but we're talking about playing Ohio State, Duke, and Louisville. These are some good defensive teams, and USC is simply not. The metrics are horrible up and down the board, and they showed it against Arizona that it's not above them to hang with some pretty mediocre teams. So, I think this is going to be a toughie for USC. I don't think they're going to get through it, but if they do, it's because Notre Dame have been in absolutely one of the craziest stretches of schedule you'll see all season. Playing Ohio State, visiting Duke, visiting Louisville, that's an absolute grinder, and I don't think anyone would fault them. Some people would fault them, but you shouldn't if they come out a little bit flatter after going through really a schedule. You don't see that kind of thing early in the college football season very often anymore. It's kind of a unique feature of that schedule of theirs, but nah, I don't think this is going to be a USC game. I think they're going to pick up their first loss this weekend.
Yeah, I'm worried too. I had two numbers. First of all, Arizona had 506 yards of offense. This is Arizona we're talking about, a basketball school. They also outpossessed USC by more than 10 minutes. This was Arizona's game to win, and it honestly looked like they should have won if not for some mistakes. Of course, USC's muffed field goal at the end. There was a lot of things that happened that kind of created this. But I don't know how many times I saw Caleb Williams just take off and make people miss. I think you're right. I don't think he's going to be able to do that against Notre Dame because they're not going to miss those tackles. They're going to contain him. They're going to make him make those throws. I'm worried too. If this is Arizona's defense, what's going to happen? What's going to happen against Notre Dame? Moving on to another big game. Colorado, Coach Prime, we got to talk about him. We do it every week. They barely squeaked by Arizona State, and Coach Prime was not happy. He was pissed that, a lot of things. They played sloppily, that the game was as close as it was. If Colorado struggles against the worst team in the Pac-12, how in the world are they going to beat, UCLA, Oregon State, Washington State, Utah, all these ranked teams? Do they run the gauntlet there, or are they going to slip up here and lose a few of those?
Yeah, first of all, I'm definitely going to take some exception to the erasure of my Stanford Cardinal as the absolute holder of the worst team in the Pac-12 title. Lost to Arizona and an FCS team whose coach we hired over the offseason, but that's a whole other story. The long story short as to how can Colorado beat the best teams in the Pac-12 is they won't. The defense was never going to be good enough to get them more than, 6-7 wins, but the offense is also faltering now. The blueprint is out. Shedur's eyes are getting trapped downfield. The team is incredibly talented, and they pulled off some very impressive upsets early, but clearly they're early. They've arrived early, and now people are taking note of them, and they can't sneak up on anyone anymore. They have a chance. The offense is potent enough at its best that they have an opportunity to steal one or two of those if they're able to turn the game into a complete shootout. But they're not going to run this gauntlet. They're going to lose more than they win probably from this point on out. But as I've been saying from the beginning, getting to a bowl is a really good accomplishment in the first year of this Coach Prime era. I've said a million times, the Pac is the toughest conference by 1,000 miles this season. And in even last year's Pac-12, or especially the year before, Colorado could be talking about like an 8-win season or something with the talent they have, but with the seasoned veteran and also extremely talented teams that you've got across this conference, they're not going to be anywhere higher than the middle of it. So a tough break for Colorado coming up in such a tough year for the conference, but I think the wins are about to almost entirely dry up for Coach Prime. But he's going to have a great season in the portal after people saw what he could do this year. I expect this team to be a legitimate contender in a much, much weaker Big 12 next season.
Yeah, I think the quote that stuck out to me after the game was when Prime said "hot garbage." That is how he characterized their play. I think it was just in the first half he was talking about specifically, but he wasn't happy. And I think that one thing that stands out to me is the sacks. Colorado's given up 31 sacks all season. That's 129th in college football, second last to only Old Dominion. Like that just can't happen when Shadur is being chased around and thrown to the ground. That's the number that sticks out to me. And I think as they play these tougher teams and tougher defenses, that's only going to get worse. I don't see how that improves. Dion said he was sick of it, but to be honest, I don't see. I agree. I don't see them winning a majority of these games, these big ranked games. But you know what? I agree with you. This is a sort of a stepping stone sort of season where a bowl game is great. You go to the transfer portal, you recruit next year, and they'll be fine. They'll be fine because it's Prime. Moving on to the Red River Showdown, Oklahoma and Texas. This was also one of the games of the week because it came down to the end. We had a big drive from Dylan Gabriel. If he wasn't in Heisman conversations, he is now. First of all, is Texas actually not back? And does Oklahoma have a clear path to the CFP now?
I mean, it depends what you're talking about when you ask if they're back. I mean, is this the Vince Young team that could absolutely run the table, go to Pasadena, get the job done? No. But on any given Saturday, this team absolutely has the ability to hang with anyone. We saw it in Tuscaloosa. I don't think that was a total mirage. I just don't think they're capable of capturing that every Saturday. Quinn Ewers had an absolute career day in terms of hitting his shots against Alabama, to his credit, for the second year in a row against Alabama before he got hurt last year. But if he's not hitting shots at that rate down the field, which he doesn't consistently, he has the ability to hit any throw, but to hit every throw every time, that's not a Quinn Ewers thing at this point in his career. I'd love to see him get into the hands of a great NFL coaching staff, but that's another discussion. Consistency is still an issue for this team, and they can beat anybody, but they're not going to have that Alabama type showing every single weekend, and they showed that against Oklahoma. The path to make the playoffs is incredibly narrow at this point. They absolutely have to win out, and they still have to hope for help because the Big 12 is terrible. For all the years I've seen the Pac-12 champ get left out, I don't think the Big 12 deserves to be in this playoff unless Oklahoma goes 13-0. That being said, they have a very clear path to the playoff, but if it's a rematch, which it probably should be in the Big 12 championship, it's hard to imagine Oklahoma pulling off the sweep. So this conference might kind of sabotage itself and make sure both teams lock each other out. I wouldn't be too surprised.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and say this was Dylan Gabriel's Heisman moment. He's got the blood on the pants gushing out of his right hand. That 1 minute drive with 0 timeouts at the end, just big throw after big throw. I think he only had to make 4 throws, but still, just to drive down the field in that type of environment. I thought that was incredible, first of all, but for Oklahoma, I agree. I think they've got to win out pretty much, which I think they can do because their schedule the rest of the way isn't all that tough. I think Kansas is the only ranked team left on their schedule. The Big 12 is weak, but if they win out, I think, they've got an easy path there.
Yeah, they have to be in if they win out. Their next resume piece, though, is probably another win against Texas. So they absolutely want it, need it, got to have it. They have to be 13-0, not because of the losses, but because of the lack of big wins. So I think it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yep, I totally agree. And speaking of another team that may or may not have a path to the CFP, Alabama, they barely beat Texas A&M. I think we all knew this had the potential to be a close game going into Texas A&M because it always is when you go to College Station. But Nick Saban wasn't happy after the game for the amount of penalties. I think they had 14 penalties for 99 yards. It was sloppy. There was some mismanaging of the clock at the end. Is Alabama, in danger of losing more games? And are you sold on Jalen Milroe?
I'm going to, interestingly enough, give you a no to both of those. I don't think highly enough of A&M to be that impressed by anything I've seen from Milroe. He's a great athlete. He's got a lot of talent, but he's hit a few more throws in recent weeks than we thought he might. But again, it's like a even way worse version of what I was talking about with Quinn. It's not going to be with any level of consistency. Now, are they in danger to lose games? Absolutely not. They face LSU and Tennessee as the next major games in the regular season. They do not have the defense to beat Alabama and Tuscaloosa whatsoever. Trip to Kentucky could be a little tough, but the blueprint's out after playing Georgia. I mean, Iron Bowl's never a must or never a guaranteed win, but Alabama should have the firepower to come out in that one. find the big plays and win. But do they have a chance to make the playoff? Now we're getting into the part of the season where we're not just talking about the caliber of the team, but we're halfway through it. We're starting to see the resumes, who's got losses, and how these spots might actually pan out. So I honestly think that Alabama is absolutely fine if they lose another game in the SEC. Hear me out. I know we've never had a 2-loss playoff team, but their loss is to Texas, so that doesn't affect their conference standing even a little bit. If they go 10-2 with 1 loss in the conference, they'll still probably make the conference title game, at which point they have to beat Georgia. Whether or not they lose another game in the conference, they have to beat Georgia. They will go in as an 11-2 SEC champ if they lose before Georgia and beat Georgia. They will not go in as an 11-2 non-champ if they win out but then lose to Georgia. So I think one more loss doesn't change their trajectory even a little bit. It's still beat Georgia, get in, lose to Georgia, better try in the 12-team playoff next year. So I don't think Alabama's sunk at all. I think it's dangerous to look at a Saban team with 1 loss and think they're sunk. Most of his titles with Alabama have not been undefeated seasons. I think he's had maybe 2 undefeated seasons in all those rings, and one was 2020. So Alabama's not in trouble, but Milroe's probably not going to get them all the way to the top. I do think Georgia will be able to take them down, but that's no different than what I would have thought before these recent games.
Yeah, it's also no guarantee. I think for Milroe, it's about learning from your mistakes and getting better and making sure you don't make those mistakes. He took credit at the end of the game. I think they had about 1:30 left and they could have kneeled it out, and the game was over. And on first down, he throws, for an incomplete pass on a screen. He took credit for it after, and he said, he basically made a mistake. So I think it's about learning from those. I think the rest of their schedule, they've got, Tennessee, Kentucky, LSU. I think those are all should win games. They're winnable games. But, for a young quarterback like Jalen Milroe, if he's making, costly mistakes here and there, they can add up. But, I'm here for the chaos of a 2-loss Alabama making the playoff. I'm totally here for it. Speaking of mismanaging the clock, we had one of, if not the worst losses in college football history. I'm not saying I've seen every game ever, but Miami losing to Georgia Tech, when they could have just kneeled it out and ended the game. Instead, they run the ball, fumble it. Georgia Tech goes back and scores a touchdown. What do you make of that? And will Miami be able to bounce back against a good North Carolina team?
I don't even know how to approach this. We've seen games lost by complete lack of execution in gimme spots. Obviously, I'll go to Michigan, trouble with the snap. We'll go to the kick in the Giants-Eagles in the NFL, the Deshaun Jackson return. Absolutely should have just gone out of bounds. We'll go back to Oregon a couple years ago when all they needed was one more first down against Stanford and they fumbled trying to run the clock out. But this is the first one I've seen that is just straight up foolishness. This wasn't a poor execution on a play that absolutely had to be made and should have been made. This was a play that did not need to be made at all. I've never seen anything like it. I don't know how that coach is going to regain the locker room. There's almost no worse feeling than getting through 59 plus minutes of a football game with a winning effort and losing it for absolutely no reason. It's just deflating. I have no idea how this team comes back. They're going on the road against a North Carolina team that has found its stride on both sides of the football. I have no idea what on earth that was, and this is not a spot for a bounce back. It may seem silly because they've played well this year so far, and it's just one snap, but that one loss turns into a sluggish start against North Carolina. That turns into a losing streak. And now you've got a demoralized football team at the midway point of the season. So maybe I'm being a little too much of a pessimist, but I think Miami's in so much trouble, at least in terms of, they're not going to lose out or anything, but in terms of they were undefeated. They were going to compete for the ACC with Clemson taking some losses and Florida State looking vulnerable. I think that's over. And losing to North Carolina this weekend would be a nail in the coffin. First of all, they shouldn't have been playing football like that tight with Georgia Tech anyways. So I think even if they won, we would have been having some sort of conversation, but now it's a really drastic one.
Yeah, I think inexcusable is the word that I would use. And I think you're right. This isn't some, physical aspect where, we drop the ball, we do something. No, this was all mental. It was a boneheaded mistake. It sounded like after the game, Cristobal took blame, the offensive coordinator, everyone pretty much took blame, and the coaching staff it doesn't really matter. Like it just can't happen. I think this also happened to him at Oregon a few years ago. I saw that all over Twitter. I don't know if he has, a history in his coaching career of doing that, where he'd rather run the ball than kneel it out and take the win, but it finally bites him. So, I mean, yeah, I don't think they bounce back from this. North Carolina's put up 40 points in 3 of their last 4 games. This is at North Carolina. This could actually be a blowout, in my opinion, coming off such a bad loss. I don't think it's great for Miami. So
yeah, I mentioned that, or I mentioned I'm a Stanford fan. That was a huge upset win for Stanford, and I think it was in Eugene. I didn't even make the connection that was Cristobal's team. My word, they technically needed another first down, but if I remember, it was in very plus territory. So they could have kicked a field goal and given it to Stanford back, not with no time left, but with very little time. So this was definitely more egregious, if I remember that Oregon game correctly, but. Yeah, he's got to figure out his late game management. It's becoming like Josh McDaniels, Brandon Staley type of territory. I can't even, and not even Staley's done anything this bad. Almost hasn't done anything this bad. It's just hard to explain.
I'd argue that it's almost a fireable offense, but that's just me. Like if I'm an AD.
I've said the same as Staley.
Okay, moving on to Oregon and Washington. This weekend should be an absolute shootout in what feels like, the type of Pac-12 matchup that everyone's kind of, waiting for and kind of expecting. Both of these teams are 5-0. It's the first time since 2004, I think that's happened in the Pac-12. What are your predictions for this game?
Yeah, you said it. Shootout is right. And that Pac-12 stat is actually crazy. I think that's an incredible testament to the strength of a conference that flies under the radar because it never makes the playoff. But that's just... There has not been a single 2-loss SEC champ in the whole playoff era. The conference is top heavy, but the Pac-12, there's almost no free wins. Stanford's there now, but there have been almost no free wins over this past 20-ish year era. And I just think that's an incredible statistic. 5-0. You never see 5-0 when Michigan and Ohio State are meeting with 10, 11 wins every single season. But into this ball game, I think this is the game of the year so far. It might end up being the game of the year. These are 2 of the best, and not just best, but most evenly matched teams in the entire country. Number 1 and 2 in the nation in offensive success rate. Defenses are not bad at all. They're better than the, kind of people joke about Pac-12 defenses, but over the past couple of years, it's been real. The Pac-12 defenses have been terrible, but these are competitive defenses. They're top 50 by most metrics on both ends. Man, this is a great one. And you've got 2 Heisman candidate quarterbacks. So there's nothing not to love. Husky Stadium, though, is a mega home field advantage. It's really hard to find an on-paper difference between these 2 teams. I like Penix more than I like Bo Nix. I also like Kalen DeBoer more than I like Dan Lanning, but top to bottom, the rosters are tight. So let's go with Washington. It's going to be a tight one. It could come down to the very last play. So I don't know how many road games you guys have watched teams play in Husky Stadium, but it can be a terrifying place. And like you said, this is one of the bigger Pac-12 matchups in years. I think the Washington faithful will be out in beyond full force. So Oregon's going to have a toughie on their hands. They haven't really had many road tests this season, so this could be a really problematic one for them.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to go with Washington here as well for the simple fact that I was just in Seattle and got to see that stadium, and it was pretty awesome. So I'm rooting for Washington and Michael Penix. I think it'd be cool for him to win the Heisman. I think people are sleeping on Bo Nix a little bit. He's got 15 touchdowns and 1 interception this season, which is pretty remarkable considering the Bo Nix I remember at Auburn. With the inconsistencies, obviously things, are very different at Oregon. I think you can expect to see a lot of offense, maybe little defense. That's what I'm hoping for, at least with the shootout. But yeah, I'm here for it. Now let's see. We'll go to upset alerts this weekend if we haven't already talked about any. Do you have any games where a team, could be on upset alert? I'll start. I've got one. I've got Auburn LSU. I know it's in Tiger Stadium, but Auburn's coming off a close game against Georgia. Plus, I think there's a stat out there that Auburn has one of the worst passing offenses. I think it's like 121st. And LSU's passing defense is 121st. I could be wrong about that, but I saw it on Twitter. So like with that number alone, I'm like, this could be one of those SEC games that is just weird, topsy-turvy. Like you never know what's going to happen. And the way the SEC beats up on each other already, I've got Auburn. Just because why not? Who knows with LSU? I mean, they've already had some interesting losses, but that's what I'm going with. What do you got?
That's an interesting one. I don't think I'd go so far as to pick Auburn, but that's a pretty good defense. LSU hasn't seen much like that, so that could be one. I've got three, kind of. I mean, we already talked about USC, Notre Dame. I don't know if that actually counts as an upset. Notre Dame's still a ranked team, but they're 11 spots below USC. People are starting to take USC less seriously, but Notre Dame's got one of the best defenses in the country. Benjamin Morrison's like the first cornerback I've ever wanted the team to tank for. I mean, they're a phenomenal unit on defense, and I think it's just going to be enough that Caleb can't carry. But we've already talked about that. I don't know if that counts as upset alert, but I've got that one. Another one that I'm not 100% sure counts. Texas A&M going to Tennessee. Tennessee is 19th. Texas A&M is unranked. We saw the run they gave Alabama. I am not taking this Tennessee team even a little bit seriously. I don't know how they're ranked. I do my own rankings every week, and I have not had Tennessee. I don't know if I've had Tennessee at any point. So this team should not be ranked, and I hope that A&M knocks them out of the rankings. And frankly, in the process, getting that road win at Neyland, they might get themselves back in. It'd be nice. They're a better team. And then the last one, this is very unanalytical, but Ohio State, Purdue, the spoiler makers. We've seen the history of this series. I mean, what else is there to say? This is their first visit to West Lafayette in several years, I think maybe since that upset. So, I don't know. It could be a bit of a look-ahead spot. I think that Ohio State goes to Penn State next weekend. So, it would be very easy to look ahead from a 2-4 team to a top 10 team that you're going to be hosting at the Horseshoe. But going into West Lafayette is not a free win, and Ohio State has proven that themselves more than anybody else. So, that one probably won't happen, but it's just got to be one you have your eyes on if you're following this OSU team.
I will get Ryan Day's face framed and put on my wall if they lose. I am here for that. It's got to go somewhere on my on my wall here. But yeah, I mean, I think Tennessee, as a Florida fan here, I'm always here for it. Go into Rocky Top and knock him off. I'm not sold on Joe Milton, the way he played against Florida, actually. So, the fact that they're ranked alone is kind of bothersome, but I think you're right. Texas A&M playing Alabama close, that does have a potential. That's going to do it for today's episode of FanBuzz Weekly. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe after this, and also make sure to sign up for our newsletter, which is going to be in the description. So, thanks, and we'll see you guys next week.